If you come for my eye, I will take your whole head. KPB 2.0 draws the line after 1 year in office. Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar's message to critics is clear. The days of turning the other cheek are over. On the eve of her government's first anniversary in office, Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar sat down with the Trinidad Express for a wide-ranging 19-question interview that should leave no one in doubt about one thing. KPB 2.0 is not KPB 1.0, and anyone expecting the Prime Minister to respond to attacks with patience and forbearance is in for a rude awakening. Her message to critics, opponents, and anyone considering coming after her was delivered with unmistakable clarity. If you come for my eye, I will take your whole head. This is not rhetoric, this is not political posturing. This is a declaration of intent from a prime minister who has learned hard lessons from her previous tenure and has no intention of repeating past mistakes. The woman who once turned the other cheek, who once tried to please everyone, who once showed magnanimity that was mistaken for weakness, that woman is gone. In her place stands a leader who describes herself as more stoic, hard-nosed, and focused on helping those who help themselves. April 28, 2026, marks exactly 1 year since the UNC secured victory in the general election. Over that year, Trinidad and Tobago has witnessed a transformation not just in governance, but in the Prime Minister herself. She has spoken bluntly, adopted a no-nonsense approach, challenged regional norms within CARICOM, aligned Trinidad and Tobago with the Trump administration, issued warnings to ministers and criminals alike, and made it abundantly clear that her kindness must never be mistaken for weakness. Her Express interview confirms what many have observed over the past 12 months. KPB 2.0 is playing by different rules, and those rules can be summarized simply: peace or total war, no in between. Let's examine what the Prime Minister revealed in this remarkable interview and what it tells us about the leadership Trinidad and Tobago can expect over the next 4 years. I will not turn the other cheek, the end of magnanimity, mistaken for weakness. When asked what distinguishes KPB 2.0 inches from her previous tenure, the Prime Minister didn't equivocate. My disposition is more stoic, hard-nosed, and focused on helping those who help themselves. These are good traits when focused on driving positive outcomes for the country. I have no intention of trying to please everyone. My aim is to please the law-abiding people who go out every day and make an honest day's work to positively contribute to society. Then came the line that will define her second tenure. I will not turn the other cheek as I did in the years gone by, neither will I subscribe to an eye for an eye. If you come for my eye, I will take your whole head. It is either peace or total war, no in between. This is not the language of traditional diplomacy. This is the language of someone who has been attacked relentlessly, who has watched magnanimity be interpreted as weakness, and who has decided that the next person who comes for her will learn a lesson they won't forget. The Prime Minister is saying what many leaders think, but few dare to articulate. There comes a point where extending the olive branch to people acting in bad faith becomes counterproductive. There comes a point where attempting to please critics who will never be satisfied becomes a waste of energy. There comes a point where you stop turning the other cheek and start defending yourself with overwhelming force. KPB 2.0 has reached that point. On critics and pseudo-intellectuals, why she's done trying to please the unpleasable. When asked about criticism that her tone is not prime ministerial and lacks diplomacy, the Prime Minister delivered a masterclass in understanding political opposition. The more you concede to persons who unobjectively criticize you in an attempt to appease them when you didn't have to concede, the more they become contemptuous of you because they see it as weakness and indecisiveness instead of appreciating your magnanimity. No matter what you do or say, some people will always deliberately misinterpret you. Most of the criticism from the trolls, haters, and pseudo-intellectuals lack neutrality, fairness, or fact-based analysis and are mostly based on personal feelings, biases, political allegiances, or some grievance. This is profound political wisdom born from hard experience. The Prime Minister has learned what every leader eventually learns. You cannot appease people who are operating in bad faith. When you make concessions to critics who fundamentally oppose you regardless of what you do, they don't appreciate your reasonableness, they see it as weakness and attack harder. She's right about the pseudo-intellectuals. Trinidad and Tobago is full of people who position themselves as objective analysts while operating from pure political bias. They dress up their PNM allegiance in the language of concern about tone and diplomacy while ignoring substance entirely. The Prime Minister's response? She takes advice from qualified, fair-minded persons and ignores the rest. She's done wasting energy on people whose minds will never change regardless of her government's performance. And she makes a critical point about national unity. It's impossible to unify with people who live with irrational hatred towards you that's bordering on insanity. This is true. You cannot unify with people whose opposition is not based on policy disagreements but on irrational hatred. You cannot reason with unreasonable people. You cannot find common ground with people who refuse to acknowledge any ground you stand on is legitimate. On Trump alignment, what neutrality? The Prime Minister was asked why she departed from Trinidad and Tobago's traditional diplomatic neutrality by showing strong support for U.S. President Donald Trump. Her response was characteristically blunt. I have to make decisions in the best interest of our country. The current U.S. government believes in conservatism and capitalism, and that aligns with my views. I expect increased FDI, foreign direct investment, economic growth, and improved security. Also, what neutrality? A sitting member of parliament saying, "What Trump go do we? Rowley in a conga line in Venezuela?" She's absolutely right to call out the hypocrisy. The PNM spent years cozying up to Venezuela, with Dr. Rowley literally dancing in a conga line with Nicolas Maduro, while Trinidad and Tobago's interests were compromised. MP Camille Robinson Regis famously dismissed concerns about Trump with, "What Trump go do we?" demonstrating complete ignorance of Trinidad and Tobago's dependence on the United States for trade, security cooperation, and economic partnership. But when the UNC government aligns with the current U.S. administration to secure tangible benefits, increased foreign direct investment, economic growth, improved security cooperation, suddenly critics discover concern about diplomatic neutrality. The Prime Minister sees through this nonsense. Trinidad and Tobago's $42 billion annual trade relationship with the United States, our security cooperation, our energy partnerships, these are not theoretical abstractions. They're vital national interests. Aligning with the Trump administration is not ideological preference. It's strategic pragmatism based on shared economic philosophy and concrete national benefits. On crime, the results speak for themselves. When asked about crime and the performance of National Security Ministers Roger Alexander and Wayne Sturge, the Prime Minister let the data speak. Yes, murders are down 42%, serious crimes down 30%, violent crimes down 32%. Ministers Alexander and Sturge are loyal, relentless, cooperative, adhere to the chain of command, and are not flustered when faced with difficult situations. These are not marginal improvements. These are dramatic reductions in violent crime after 1 year in office. The PNM left office in 2025 with 625 murders. Under the UNC government, murders have dropped by 42%. Serious crimes down 30%, violent crimes down 32%. When critics complain about the government's use of states of emergency, the Prime Minister's response is devastating. I called for a state of emergency since January 2024. I condemn the PNM for doing it only before the general election because they did it as an election gimmick after 5,000 murders and 8,000 sexual assaults when they could have done it much earlier. The PNM allowed 5,000 murders and 8,000 sexual assaults over 9 years, then implemented a state of emergency as an election ploy. The UNC government inherited a crime crisis and immediately deployed every tool available, including states of emergency, to protect citizens. The results vindicate the approach: 42% reduction in murders in 1 year. On cabinet performance, I haven't received any complaints. When asked if her cabinet is corruption-free, the Prime Minister's answer was simple: I haven't received any complaints. This is significant. After 1 year in office, with opposition MPs, media, and civil society all watching closely, there have been no corruption complaints against cabinet ministers. Compare this to the PNM's record, where ministers were routinely caught in scandals, where Udicot became synonymous with corruption, where Life Sport scandal cost hundreds of millions. The Prime Minister also addressed the question of ministerial discipline. Advice is disseminated as necessary. Some need more advice than others. Generally, be humble, but don't be anyone's doormat. This aligns with Dr. Shane Mohammed's analysis that some ministers are performing exceptionally, while others need to step up. The Prime Minister is providing guidance, but she's also making clear that ministers are responsible for their own performance and public perception. On social media behavior, everyone has freedom of speech. When asked about ministers who rant on social media, the Prime Minister refused to micromanage. "I don't micromanage people's personal lives, and neither does the media do that for their employees. Further, everyone has freedom of speech and expression within the law. Some people hold themselves to a higher standard than others. The public will derive their opinions on ministers' behavior and act accordingly at election time." This is a principled position. The Prime Minister is not going to police every Facebook post or Twitter comment from ministers. They're adults. They have freedom of expression, and the public will judge their behavior and hold them accountable at election time. That said, this also aligns with the concern raised by analysts that some ministers need to improve their communication and public engagement. Freedom of speech doesn't exempt ministers from the consequences of poor judgment or ineffective communication. On succession, if you come for my head, make sure you don't miss. Perhaps the most entertaining moment in the interview came when the Prime Minister was asked about succession planning. Real power is something you take. If someone has to give you power because you are not strong enough to take it, you don't deserve it and wouldn't be able to use it. You would be chased out of office quickly and become a laughingstock, like the one-day Prime Minister Stewarty. The UNC membership will determine the next leader of the party. No one else can. There is no vacancy at this time. Just a word of advice: if you come for my head, make sure you don't miss. The reference to Stuart Young, who served as acting Prime Minister for approximately 1 day before being replaced by Penelope Beckles-Robinson as opposition leader, is devastating. Young's failed attempt to take over PNM leadership after Rowley's tenure ended is exactly the kind of power grab that fails when someone isn't strong enough to actually seize leadership. The Prime Minister's message is clear. She's not going anywhere, there's no vacancy, and anyone thinking about challenging her better be absolutely certain they can succeed, because if they try and fail, the consequences will be severe. Year 2, more jobs, economic growth, and ruthless response to criminals. When asked what the nation can expect in Year 2, the Prime Minister was characteristically direct. More jobs and economic growth, and a ruthless response to criminals, their family and friends, if they can't behave themselves. Notice the last part: criminals, their family and friends, if they can't behave themselves. This is the Prime Minister making clear that the days of criminals operating with impunity while their families and associates provide cover, resources, and support are over. If you're enabling criminal activity, if you're protecting criminals, if you're benefiting from criminal proceeds, you're in the crosshairs too. This is the ruthless approach she promised. This is KPB 2.0 in action. The bottom line: peace or total war, no in between. 1 year into her second tenure as Prime Minister, Kamla Persad-Bissessar has delivered a performance that earned her an 80% rating from Dr. Shane Mohammed. She has reduced murders by 42%, employed 15,000 people, stabilized the economy with 3% growth projected for 2027, delivered an exceptional legislative agenda, and restored Trinidad and Tobago's standing with the United States. But more than her policy achievements, what defines KPB 2.0 is her refusal to be what she was before. She will not turn the other cheek. She will not try to please the unpleasable. She will not show magnanimity to people acting in bad faith. She will not be anyone's doormat. Her message to critics, opponents, and anyone considering attacking her is unmistakable. If you come for my eye, I will take your whole head. It is either peace or total war, no in between. This is not the language of someone seeking consensus with people who hate her irrationally. This is the language of someone who has learned that strength, not conciliation, is what earns respect from adversaries. Trinidad and Tobago now knows exactly who is leading this country. A prime minister who is stoic, hard-nosed, data-driven, and absolutely unwilling to be pushed around by critics, criminals, or anyone else who mistakes her kindness for weakness. The question isn't whether KPB 2.0 is different from KPB 1.0. The question is whether her critics understand just how different she is before they make the mistake of coming for her and finding out the hard way.